Zoe woke to something strange weighing on her left hand. Before she could even open her eyes all the way, she felt cold metal pressed against her skin. When her vision finally focused, her heart stopped for a second. A diamond ring glittered on her ring finger. Massive, obviously expensive, and completely unfamiliar. "What?" she whispered, her voice rough and cracked. She jerked upright in bed, and the movement sent a headache exploding through her skull like fireworks. The room spun around her for a few seconds. When it finally settled, Zoe looked around, and panic started creeping into her veins like ice. This wasn't her room. This wasn't her tiny apartment in Chicago. She was in a luxury suite, walls lined with marble, deep wine-red velvet curtains, and huge windows pouring in sunlight. The furniture looked like carved antique wood, probably worth more than her entire salary as a schoolteacher. "Where am I?" she murmured, trying to summon any memory of the night before. Fragments began flashing through her mind like blurry photographs. The airport, the excitement, her best friend, Amanda, shrieking something about a bachelorette weekend in Las Vegas. Drinks, a lot of drinks. Neon lights. Music so loud she felt it vibrating in her chest. A casino. More drinks. And then, nothing. Complete, terrifying blankness. Zoe looked at the ring again. Her hand was shaking. It couldn't be a real diamond. It had to be something cheap, some bachelorette party joke. But deep down, she already knew the stone was real. The way it caught the light, the way it sat heavy on her finger, this was a genuine diamond. Panic took over. She threw off the silk sheets and realized she was wearing nothing but lace lingerie she'd never seen before. Black, expensive, definitely not hers. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," she repeated like a mantra, scrambling out of bed. Her legs were unsteady, but she made it to the massive full-length mirror across the room. She stared at her reflection and froze. Her brown hair was a mess, mascara smeared under her eyes, and on her neck were red marks. Not painful, but visible enough to suggest an intimacy she couldn't remember. "No," she whispered, feeling her stomach climb into her throat. "No, no, no." She searched the room desperately for her clothes. She found last night's dress, a simple black cocktail dress, thrown over a velvet armchair in the corner. Beside it were her high heels, one standing up, the other tipped on its side. When she moved to grab them, she noticed something else. A man's suit, elegant, perfectly tailored, black as night. A white dress shirt folded carefully over the back of the chair. And on top of it all, a silk tie coiled loosely around the armrest. Someone had been here. Someone had slept in that bed with her. Zoe's heart began to slam against her ribs. She spun around, staring at the enormous bed again, as if it could somehow reveal secrets she didn't remember. The sheets were rumpled on both sides. 2 pillows showed clear signs of use. "Who was he?" she whispered to the empty room. Before she could think any further, she heard a sound from behind the bathroom door across the suite. Running water. Someone was in the shower. The panic turned into pure terror. She had to get out of there immediately. Zoe grabbed her dress and tried to yank it on, nearly tripping in the process. Her fingers were trembling so badly she could barely zip up the back. She shoved her feet into her heels, not caring that one strap was twisted. She needed her purse. She needed her phone. Her eyes swept the room frantically. There, on the nightstand on the other side of the bed, her small black purse sat there, its edge hanging over the corner of the table. She moved toward it, but the moment she took her first step, the bathroom door clicked open. Zoe froze mid-stride. Steam rolled out of the bathroom, warm and soft, carrying the scent of expensive soap and something else, something male, clean, almost hypnotic. And then he walked out. Time seemed to slow down. The man wore nothing but loose black sweatpants hanging low on his hips. His chest was bare, and Zoe couldn't look away. He was tall, much taller than her, with broad shoulders and a muscular chest. But it wasn't his build that made her forget how to breathe. It was the tattoos. They covered most of his torso and arms, intricate, dark designs that looked like artwork carved straight into skin. Roses wound up his right arm, tangled with what looked like a Gothic inscription in a language she didn't recognize. On the left side of his chest was the silhouette of a lion, majestic and menacing. And along his ribs, barely visible in the shifting light, surnames. Italian surnames. Zoe swallowed hard, her throat tightening. The man lifted his gaze, and their eyes met, and that's when she finally saw his face. It was striking. A strong jaw shadowed with stubble, cheekbones that looked carved by an artist's hand, full lips that held something sensual even in their seriousness. But it was his eyes that truly caught her. Dark, so dark they were almost black. And in that darkness, there was something dangerous, something controlled, something that told her this man was not an ordinary person. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, one corner of his mouth lifted into a faint, almost amused smile. "Buongiorno, Mogli mia," he said, his voice deep, velvet, thick with an unmistakable Italian accent. Zoe narrowed her eyes, trying to process the words. Her Italian was rusty at best, but one word cut through her fog like a knife through butter. "Mogli, wife? What did you say?" she stammered, her voice barely audible. The man tilted his head, his dark eyes studying her with something between amusement and something far more intense. "I said, 'Good morning, my wife,'" he repeated, this time in English. His accent gave the words an almost musical quality. Zoe felt the room spin all over again. "Wife?" she repeated, her voice rising. "What do you mean, wife?" The man took a step toward her, his movements fluid and controlled, like a predator's. Zoe instinctively stepped back, and her heels hit the edge of the bed. "You don't remember?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, clear amusement now in his voice. "I don't remember," Zoe cried, feeling tears sting her eyes. "I don't remember anything. Where am I? Who are you? What happened last night?" The man stopped a few steps away from her, crossing his muscular arms over his chest, the tattoos shifting with the movement. For a moment he studied her, as if weighing how much he should say. Then he sighed. "My name is Luca Russo," he said calmly. "And you're in my suite at the Bellagio, Las Vegas." Zoe opened her mouth, but no words came out. Luca Russo. That name sounded familiar, very familiar. But from where? Luca went on, his voice calm, almost indifferent. "As for what happened last night." He paused, and a shadow of a smile crossed his lips. "We got married." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" she managed to say. Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and white, a marriage certificate. He handed it to her. Zoe took the document with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the text, but the words blurred together. Then she saw it. Her signature, real, legal, sitting right beside his in confident, elegant handwriting. Luca Antonio Russo. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no, this is impossible. I wouldn't do this. I never would." "You were very drunk," Luca cut in, his tone still calm. "We both were. We met at the casino. We talked. You drank more. I suggested a little wedding chapel nearby. You thought it was a great idea." Zoe felt her knees buckle. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, the certificate still clutched in her hands. "This can't be real," she murmured. "This is a nightmare. It has to be a nightmare." Luca watched her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened, just slightly. "It's not a nightmare," he said quietly. "But I understand you might feel that way." Zoe lifted her eyes to him, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do this? If you knew I was drunk, why did you let it happen?" For a moment, Luca said nothing. His jaw tightened, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Regret. Guilt. But before he could answer, his phone rang somewhere in the room, sharp and insistent. Luca turned and crossed to the nightstand, where a sleek black smartphone sat. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed instantly. Tension filled his shoulders. "Yes," he answered sharply. There was a moment of silence, during which Zoe watched his jaw grow tighter and tighter. "No, Nora," he growled. "I'll deal with it later." He hung up without a goodbye and set the phone down harder than necessary. When he turned back to Zoe, there was a new intensity in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. "But not here. Get dressed. We'll meet in the living room in 10 minutes. Before Zoe could protest, Luca walked out of the bedroom, closing the door behind him with a soft click, leaving her alone. Alone with the marriage certificate in her hands. Alone with the ring on her finger. Alone with the impossible truth. She was married, and her husband was a stranger. Zoe stood under the shower in the lavish bathroom for 15 minutes, letting the hot water run over her skin, hoping somehow it would wash away the absurdity of the last few hours. But when she finally stepped out and wrapped herself in the soft white robe hanging behind the door, reality was still there, waiting like a shadow. She was married. She had married a stranger, Luca Russo. That name kept echoing in her head, insistent and familiar, but she couldn't place where she knew it from. Maybe she'd read it somewhere, in the papers, online. She opened her purse and, with relief, found her phone. The screen showed 23 missed calls from Amanda and countless texts. "Where are you, Zoe? Answer your phone. I'm starting to worry. If you don't call in an hour, I'm calling the police." The last message had been sent 30 minutes ago. Zoe quickly typed a reply. "I'm fine, long story. I'll call you later." She couldn't talk to Amanda right now, not until she understood what she'd gotten herself into. She put her black dress back on, it was all she had, and pulled her hair into a low ponytail. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale and frightened, but at least more sober than an hour ago. She took a deep breath and walked out of the room. The suite was even more impressive in daylight. High ceilings, huge windows overlooking the Vegas Strip, furniture that looked like it came from an Italian palace. Everything screamed money, serious money. She followed the marble hallway until she reached a spacious living room, and there he was. Lucas stood by the window, looking down at the city. He was fully dressed now, black pants, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos on his forearms. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a luxury magazine. But there was something raw about him, something dangerous no photographer could ever capture. In his hand, he held a glass of whiskey, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. "Sit down," he said without turning around. Zoe hesitated for a moment, then sat on the edge of a cream-colored leather sofa, hands in her lap, nervously twisting the ring still resting on her finger. She tried to take it off earlier, but it fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Luca finally turned and walked toward her. He sat in an armchair across from her, his posture relaxed, but something intense burned in his eyes. "You have questions," he said. It wasn't a question. "I have a million questions," Zoe answered, her voice steadier than she expected. "Let's start with the most important one. Who are you, really?" Luca lifted his glass to his lips and took a sip, his eyes never leaving her face. "I told you. Luca Russo." "That tells me nothing," she snapped. "Who are you? What do you do? Why do you have this suite? And why?" Her voice trembled. "Why would you agree to marry someone you don't even know?" For a long moment, Lucas said nothing. He set his glass down on the glass table between them with a soft click. "I'm a businessman," he said finally. "Family business. Import. Export. Investments." "What kind of import and export?" Zoe pressed. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Various kinds." That wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. Zoe felt frustration building in her chest. "Look, I'm not an idiot. I saw your tattoos. I saw the surnames on your ribs. I heard your phone call. I'm a teacher, not an FBI agent. But even I can tell something doesn't add up here." Something crossed Luca's face. Respect, recognition. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his dark eyes fixed on her with such intensity she had to fight not to look away. "Fine," he said quietly. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth." He paused, weighing every word. "My family runs several business ventures. Some legal, some in a gray area. And I'm expected to take over leadership of those ventures." Zoe's heart pounded harder. "Gray area," she repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" Lucas sighed. "It means my family has connections. Connections that run deep. And to take control of those connections, of the company, of everything my family has built for generations, I have to meet a certain condition." "What condition?" "I have to be married." The words hung in the air between them. Zoe blinked. Luca leaned back in the chair, rubbing his jaw. "My father died 6 months ago," he said, and a shadow of pain crossed his voice. "Before he died, he changed his will. According to his final wishes, I can only take over the company if I'm married and remain married for at least 6 months." Zoe shook her head, trying to process it. "Wait, so this whole thing is a setup?" "No," Lucas said sharply. "Meeting you wasn't planned. The wedding wasn't planned. I was drunk. You were drunk. Things spiraled. But now it works out for you, doesn't it?" Zoe's voice turned bitter. Luca didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Yes," he said finally. "It works out for me." Zoe felt anger bubbling in her chest. "So what now? We just stay married?" Pretend this is real for 6 months, and then, what divorce? She stood abruptly, fists clenched. You're unbelievable. Do you actually think I'll just accept this? That I'll wreck my life for your convenient little business requirement? Lucas stood too. His height towered over her, but he didn't move closer. He just stood there, calm, unshaken. No, he said quietly. I don't expect you to do it for free. Zoe narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A check. He handed it to her. Zoe took it with trembling fingers and stared at the amount. $250,000. The world tilted. What is this? She whispered. Your payment, Lucas said. For 6 months of being my wife. All I need is for you to live with me, show up at a few family gatherings, convince everyone we're a real marriage. After 6 months, you get the divorce, this check, and you walk away, no questions asked. Zoe stared at the number on the check. Her mind spun. It was more money than she'd earned in 4 years of teaching. Enough to pay off every student loan. Enough to stop worrying about bills. Enough to start over. But at what price? I can't, she whispered, holding the check back out to him. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. This is insane. Luca didn't take the check. He just watched her. You have debts, he said quietly. Zoe froze. What? Student loans, $62,000. Plus credit card debt. Plus rent, you're 2 months behind. The color drained from her face. How do you know that? Luca's expression was unyielding. I'm a businessman. Researching people is part of my job. You investigated me? Anger came rushing back, hot and sharp. You dug into my life without my consent. I married you, Luca replied calmly. I needed to know who I was dealing with. You had no right. I have every right. You're my wife. The words hit her like a slap. For a moment, they stood in silence. The tension between them was thick and heavy. Then Luca sighed. Look, he said, his tone softening, just slightly. I know this is crazy. I know it's not normal. But this is your chance to get out of debt, to start over. All you have to do is pretend for 6 months. Pretend what? Zoe asked bitterly. That you love me. Something crossed Luca's face, something too quick for her to catch. No, he said quietly. Just pretend you're happy. That's all I need. Zoe looked away, her mind racing. It was too much. All of it was simply too much. But then she thought of her apartment in Chicago, the bills piling up on her desk, the sleepless nights spent worrying about how she'd pay for everything. $250,000 could change her life. And if I agree, she said slowly, still not looking at him. What are the rules? She heard Luca exhale. It was relief. You'll move into my suite here in Vegas. You'll wear the ring. You'll attend family dinners and gatherings. In public, we act like a married couple. And in private? She asked, finally looking at him. His dark eyes met hers. In private, you can do whatever you want. You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't ask for anything you don't want to give. Something in the way he said it made her cheeks burn. She looked away. And after 6 months, I just leave. After 6 months, you get the divorce and the money. End of story. It sounded so simple, so clean. But deep down, Zoe knew nothing in life ever was. She thought of Amanda, of her family back in Chicago. What would she tell them? How would she explain any of this? And yet, $250,000. Freedom. I'll give you 24 hours to think it over, Lucas said, as if reading her mind. If you refuse, I'll arrange a quick divorce. No questions, no problems. You can go back to your life as if none of this happened. And if I agree? Luca extended his hand. Then we have a deal. Zoe looked at his outstretched hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles. The hand of a man who'd done more than just sign papers. This was madness, absolute madness. But when she looked into his dark eyes, she saw something beyond just a business transaction. Something lonely, something desperate. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, they both needed this madness. She didn't shake his hand. Not yet. 24 hours, she repeated. Luca nodded and lowered his hand. 24 hours. Zoe took a deep breath. I need my own room. I need to call my friend. I need to think. The door at the end of the hall, to the left, Luca said, gesturing. It's yours if you agree. It's already furnished. You can stay there tonight regardless of your decision. Zoe nodded, not trusting her own voice. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. She turned back. He stood there, silhouetted against the panoramic windows of Las Vegas behind him. and there was something almost fragile in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for how all this happened. I didn't plan it. But now that it has, I want you to know I won't treat you like a business transaction. You deserve better than that." The words caught her off guard. For a moment, she saw something beneath the surface, something human, something real. Then it vanished, hidden again behind his usual mask of control. Zoe didn't answer. She simply turned and walked to her room. Her heart pounded, her mind spinning with questions she had no answers to. When she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it and slid down to the floor. She looked at the ring on her finger, then the phone in her hand. 24 hours to make a decision that would change everything. And deep down, even if she didn't want to admit it, she already knew what she'd decide. Because sometimes the craziest decisions are the ones we need. And sometimes strangers are exactly what our lives need in order to change. For months had passed. For months since Zoe said yes to Luca's proposal. For months since her life changed beyond recognition. Now she stood on the balcony of the Vegas suite, watching the sun set over the strip, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and violet. The wind stirred her hair, longer now, healthier, thanks to the luxury products she could finally afford. The ring still gleamed on her finger. She'd grown used to its weight. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like not to wear it. Behind her, through the open sliding doors, she could hear Luca's voice, deep, authoritative, speaking Italian on the phone. He sounded irritated. He often sounded that way lately. Whatever the business actually was, it was becoming more and more complicated. Zoe closed her eyes and breathed deep. The first weeks had been the strangest, living with a stranger, pretending during the day to be a real married couple, learning to navigate a world she'd never understood. A world of expensive restaurants, private meetings, people who looked at Luca with a mix of respect and fear. But somewhere along the way, between the second family dinner and the third month of living together, something shifted. They stopped being strangers. She wasn't sure exactly when it happened. Maybe it was when Luca brought her Italian coffee at 3 a.m, after finding her crying over bills she could finally afford to pay. Maybe it was the first time she saw him laugh, really laugh, over a silly joke she made at breakfast. Or maybe it was the first time they kissed. No, she corrected herself, the second time. Technically they'd kissed during the wedding ceremony, but neither of them remembered that. The first kiss they actually remembered had happened 6 weeks ago. They'd been at a family dinner, one of those formal, tense gatherings with the Russo clan, where every word was weighed and every glance meant something more. They sat at a long table, surrounded by Luca's uncles, aunts, cousins, all watching, all judging. Luca's mother, an elegant woman with steel eyes and impeccable posture, sat at the head of the table. She'd eyed Zoe with distrust from the very first meeting. "Tell me, Zoe," Mrs. Russo said, her English perfect but cold. "How long did you know my son before you married him?" It was a test. There was always a test. Zoe felt Luca's hand find hers under the table, squeezing gently, a sign of support. "Not long," Zoe answered honestly, because she'd learned that the truth, or her version of it, worked best. Sometimes it only takes a moment to recognize someone who's going to change your life. Mrs. Russo narrowed her eyes. A romantic outlook, but a practical one. Before Zoe could respond, Luca cut in, his voice calm but firm. "Mama, Zoe is my wife. She deserves respect." The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mrs. Russo looked at her son, then back at Zoe. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the older woman nodded. "You're right, Luca. Forgive me, Zoe." It wasn't a sincere apology, but it was enough. After dinner, once they were back in the car, a sleek black Maserati Luca drove with casual ease, Zoe finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "Your mother hates me," she said, resting her head against the headrest. Luca glanced at her sideways, one corner of his mouth lifting. "She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't trust you yet." "What's the difference?" "A big one. Trust can be earned." He shook his head. "Hate is forever." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the neon lights of Vegas flickering past the windows like colorful ghosts. Then Luca pulled up outside her building, but he didn't get out right away. He just sat there, hands still gripping the wheel. "Thank you," he said quietly. Zoe turned to him. "For what?" "For handling that tonight. I know it's not easy. My family, they're complicated." Zoe smiled weakly. "That's a gentle way of putting it." Luca finally looked at her, and in his dark eyes was something warm, something real. Seriously, you did well. My mother doesn't apologize often. The fact that she did means you're starting to reach her. Something in the way he looked at her made her heart beat faster. They were so close in the cramped space of the car. She could smell his cologne, woodsy, masculine, familiar now after months of sharing space. Luca, she whispered, not entirely sure what she meant to say. But she didn't have to say anything. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a rushed or desperate kiss. It was slow, deliberate, as if giving her the chance to pull away if she wanted. She didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hand rising to rest against his cheek, feeling the roughness of his stubble under her fingers. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing harder. Luca rested his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. This wasn't in the contract, he murmured. I know, Zoe whispered. It complicates things. I know. But neither of them pulled away. And from that moment, everything changed. The kisses became more frequent. At first, only during public events, a quick goodbye kiss in front of the family, holding hands during walks. But then they started happening in private too. In the morning over coffee. At night watching TV. The lines they'd drawn between pretending and truth began to blur. Zoe knew she was falling for him. It terrified her. Because what would happen when the 6 months ended? What would happen when the contract was up? She'd asked him that a week ago. It was late at night. Neither of them could sleep. They both often had insomnia. They sat in the living room, Luca with his laptop, Zoe with a book she wasn't really reading. Luca, she said finally. He answered without looking up from the screen. What happens in 2 months? This time he looked up. Caution filled his eyes. What do you mean? Our contract ends in 2 months. I get the divorce and the money, remember? Something crossed his face, something too quick to catch. I remember, he said quietly, and pressed his laptop shut, setting it aside. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What do you want me to say, Zoe? I want to know what you feel. It's complicated. Everything's complicated, she said, frustrated. But I need to know, is this real for you? Am I real to you? Or is it still just business? Luca looked at her for a long time, some internal battle raging in his dark eyes. Then he stood and walked to the window, turning his back to her. I fell in love with you, he said quietly. Zoe's world stopped. What? He turned, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. I fell in love with you, he repeated. I didn't plan it. I fought it, but it happened. And I don't know what to do about it. Zoe stood, her heart pounding. Luca, my world isn't a good world. It's not your decision, Zoe cut in. It's not flowers and rainbows. It's danger. It's violence. It's things I never wanted you dragged into. I should protect you. His voice rose. I should keep you away from all of this. But I'm too selfish, because I want you to stay. I want this to be real. Tears filled Zoe's eyes. It already is real, Luca whispered, closing his eyes as if the words caused him pain. Don't you understand? I understand more than you think, Zoe said, moving closer to him. I know your business is dangerous. I know people fear you. I know not everything you do is legal. He opened his eyes and looked at her. And that doesn't scare you? It scares me, she admitted. But you know what scares me more? The idea of leaving. The idea of going back to Chicago and pretending none of this happened. That you never happened. His jaw tightened. Zoe lifted her hand to touch his face. I love you, she said. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened, but it's true. And if you love me too, then we'll find a way to make it work. For a long moment, Luca just looked at her, a storm of emotion burning in his eyes. Then he pulled her against him and kissed her deeply, desperately, as if trying to pour into that kiss every word he couldn't say. And that night, something between them changed. They stopped pretending. What had been false became true. But the truth, as Zoe was about to learn, came with a price. Now, standing on the balcony, remembering that night, Zoe heard Luca finish his phone call. His footsteps approached the balcony. She felt his arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked quietly. How much everything has changed, she said, leaning into him. In a good way? He turned her in his arms, looking into his dark eyes. In the best way possible, she smiled. That rare, genuine smile reserved only for her. Good, he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Because I have news for you. What is it? I finalized all the paperwork. The company is officially mine now. Zoe's heart leapt. That means our deal is done, he finished. 6 months have passed. You got what you wanted. I got what I wanted. He paused, and his eyes turned serious. But now I want something more. Zoe swallowed. What? Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a different ring than the one she already wore. This one was simpler, more delicate, but somehow more beautiful. I want to start over, he said quietly. I want us to get married again, not for business, not for money, just for us. Tears filled Zoe's eyes. Luca, I know my world isn't perfect, he continued. I know it'll be dangerous, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to protect you, to build a life where we can be happy. She looked at the ring, then at him. You'll have to give some things up, she said quietly. I know. The crime, the illegal business, all of it has to go. Luca nodded slowly. Maybe not all at once, but it has to go. I already started. You already started? It was true. She'd seen him turn down certain meetings, transfer certain business dealings to others. It was a slow process, but it was real. It won't be easy, she warned. Nothing worth having ever is. Zoe smiled through her tears. So, are you asking me to marry you? No, Lucas said, smiling too. I'm asking you to be my wife. My real wife. Forever. Zoe's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times, yes. He kissed her as the sun set behind them, and Las Vegas glittered in the distance like a sea of stars. And somewhere in that embrace, the pretending ended, and the truth began. 3 weeks after the engagement, everything fell apart. Zoe woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of a door slamming shut. She bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering. Beside her, Luca's spot was empty, the sheets still warm. Luca, she called, her voice trembling in the dark. For a moment, silence. Then she heard voices from the living room, loud, aggressive, speaking rapid Italian. One of the voices belonged to Luca. The others were unfamiliar, threatening. Zoe slipped out of bed, reaching for her robe. Her hands shook so badly she could barely tie the belt. Something was wrong, very wrong. She crept toward the bedroom door and eased it open just enough to see a slice of the living room. What she saw turned her blood to ice. Luca stood in the middle of the room, wearing only pajama pants, his torso tense as a wire. Facing him were 4 men in dark suits, guns clearly visible at their belts. One of them, an older man with a scar running down his left cheek, was speaking harshly to Luca. You don't just walk away, Luca, he growled. The family won't accept it. I'm leaving gradually, Luca answered, his voice low but firm. I've already transferred most of the business. Most, the scarred man cut in. You think that's enough? You think the families in Chicago and New York will wait patiently? Zoe felt her stomach twist into a knot. Families. Chicago. New York. Words that sounded like they belonged in a mob movie, and were now her terrifying reality. Luca stepped forward. I have agreements. Agreements mean nothing, another man shouted. You're weak, Luca. Ever since that girl showed up, you've gone soft. The younger man, with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, added coldly. Weakness gets you killed in our world, and we can't afford that. Time slowed down. Zoe watched his hand reach for his holster. She saw the flash of metal in the dim light. And then she heard the blast. The gunshot was so loud Zoe screamed involuntarily. A second shot. A third. A fourth. Luca! She shrieked without thinking, running out of the room. The world exploded into chaos. Suddenly the suite was flooded with people. The front doors burst open, and agents in bulletproof vests poured in, shouting orders. FBI. Hands up. Weapons down. Everything happened too fast. Screaming, crashing, flashing lights. Zoe saw one of the men drop to the floor. Then another. A third tried to run, but was tackled instantly. And then she saw Luca. He was by the sofa, his hand pressed against his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. But he was alive. Breathing. Luca. Zoe ran to him, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands shook as she tried to see the wound. Oh my God, Luca. Zoe. His voice was weak, but he tried to smile. Told you to go back to the bedroom. Idiot. She wept, trying to stop the bleeding. Idiot. Stupid, stupid idiot. A tall woman in an FBI jacket rushed over. Medics, she shouted. Then she knelt beside Zoe. Mrs. Russo, We need to take care of him. Please step back. But Zoe didn't want to let go. Couldn't. Luca touched her face with his bloodied hand. Zoe, I'm sorry. Don't, she sobbed. Don't apologize. Just be okay, please. The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. Gently but firmly, they pulled Zoe away. She watched, helpless, as they worked on Luca, bandaging the wound, preparing him for transport. The FBI agent put a hand on Zoe's shoulder. Mrs. Russo, you're coming with us to the hospital. Your husband needs surgery, but the doctors will do everything they can. Zoe nodded, unable to speak. In the ambulance, watching the paramedics hook Luca up to various machines, she felt reality slam into her with its full weight. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a movie. This was real life, real bullets, real blood. And the man she loved had almost died. At the hospital, time lost all meaning. Zoe sat in the waiting room, still in her robe stained with Luca's blood, watching seconds turn into minutes and minutes into hours. Agent Martinez, as she'd introduced herself, sat beside her, quietly explaining what had happened. Your husband has been cooperating with us for 3 months, she said. He was giving us information about the family structures, the illegal operations. He knew leaving would be dangerous, so he asked us for help. Zoe stared at her, shock and anger mixing in her eyes. He knew for 3 months and didn't tell me. Martinez sighed. He was protecting you. If you'd known too much, you would have become a target. It's safer this way. Safer. Zoe laughed bitterly. My husband just got shot. How is that safer? Before Martinez could answer, the operating room doors opened. A surgeon walked out, pulling off his mask. Zoe jumped to her feet. How is he? The doctor smiled faintly. He got lucky. The bullet went through the arm, but it didn't hit any major arteries or bones. He'll need recovery time, but he should make a full recovery. Zoe felt her legs give out. Martinez caught her. You can see him soon. We're moving him to post-op. We'll let you know when you can go in. Another hour of waiting. Another hour where Zoe sat alone with her thoughts, and those thoughts were dark. Gunshots. Blood. FBI. Secrets. This wasn't the life she wanted. This wasn't the world she wanted to live in. Finally, a nurse came for her. She led Zoe down a long, sterile hallway to a small room. Inside, Luca lay in a hospital bed, pale but conscious, his left arm bandaged and immobilized. When he saw Zoe, he tried to smile. Hey. Zoe stopped in the doorway. For a moment, she just looked at him. This man who had become her entire world. This man who had almost died. Then she began to cry. She walked to the bed and sank into the chair beside it, covering her face with her hands. Zoe. Luca's voice was soft. Zoe, look at me. But she couldn't. She couldn't look at him without seeing the blood, without hearing the gunshots. You lied to me, she whispered through her tears. 3 months, cooperating with the FBI. And you didn't tell me. I had to protect you. I don't want your protection. She lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. I want a partner. I want someone who trusts me enough to tell me the truth. Luca closed his eyes. If I'd told you, you would have been in more danger. And now that those men know who I am, I'm safe. She didn't answer, because they both knew the answer. Zoe stood, her whole body trembling. I can't do this, Luca, she said quietly. I can't live in a world where every single day I have to wonder if you'll come home alive. I can't live with fear. He opened his eyes, panic flashing in their darkness. Zoe. No. I need time. She cut him off. I need to think. Zoe, please. But she was already leaving. She walked out of the room, down the hospital hallway, out into the cold Vegas night air, and just walked. Tears streaming down her cheeks, her heart breaking into a million pieces, because she loved him. God, how she loved him. But sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes love couldn't survive the darkness. For months later, Zoe stood in her small Chicago apartment, watching the winter landscape through the window. Snow fell gently, covering the city in a blanket of white. She'd gone home. She'd gone back to teaching. She'd gone back to her old life. But nothing was the same, because her heart was still in Las Vegas. During the first weeks after she left, Luca had called every day, sent messages, begged her to come back, to give him another chance. But Zoe never answered. She couldn't. Every time she heard his voice, she saw the blood, heard the gunshots. Gradually the calls stopped. The messages stopped coming. And Zoe convinced herself it was for the best. She convinced herself she'd made the right choice. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. Amanda visited often, bringing food, trying to cheer her up, but even her best friend couldn't fix the emptiness in Zoe's heart. "You should call him," Amanda said one night, as they sat in Zoe's living room with wine. "I can't." "Why?" "Because if I call, I'll go back. And if I go back," Zoe shook her head. "I can't live in that world, Amanda. I can't." Amanda took her friend's hand. "But can you live without him?" Zoe didn't answer, because the answer was too painful. That night, alone in her empty apartment, Zoe let herself look at the ring she still wore. She'd tried to take it off dozens of times, but she never could, because deep down, despite the fear, despite the pain, she was still his wife. And she still loved him. She reached for her phone. Maybe just one call, maybe just to hear his voice. But before she could dial the number, her phone rang. Unknown number, Las Vegas area code. Zoe's heart pounded harder. "It's Luca," she thought, and answered with a shaking voice. "Hello, is this Zoe Russo?" The voice was female, official. "Yes. I'm calling from University Medical Center in Las Vegas. Your husband, Luca Russo, was admitted an hour ago. He's been shot." Zoe's world stopped. "What?" "He's had surgery. He's in critical condition. If you can come." Zoe wasn't listening anymore. She threw the phone onto the couch and ran to her room, pulling a suitcase from the closet. She didn't think, didn't plan. She only knew one thing. She had to get to him, had to be with him, because no matter the fear, no matter the danger, she knew the truth. She loved him, and life without him wasn't life at all. The flight to Las Vegas was the longest 4 hours of Zoe's life. She sat by the window, gripping her phone, praying to a God she wasn't even sure she believed in. "Please, please, let him live. I'll give anything. I'll do anything. Just let him live." When she finally landed, she took a taxi straight to the hospital, ran through the front doors, nearly knocking over an elderly woman with a walker. "Luca Russo," she gasped to the nurse at the front desk. Where is he?" The nurse checked the computer. "Third floor." But Zoe was already running toward the elevators. On the third floor, the intensive care unit was quiet, sterile, full of humming machines and hushed conversations. She approached the nurse on duty. "Luca Russo. I'm his wife." The nurse looked at her with compassion. "Room 312. But I have to warn you, he hasn't regained consciousness since surgery." Zoe nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Room 312 was at the end of the hall. She stopped in front of the door, breathing deep. Then she walked in. Luca lay in the bed, surrounded by machines, his skin pale, almost gray. A tube ran from his mouth, helping him breathe. Both his chest and his arm were bandaged. He looked fragile. This strong, powerful man looked like he could break at any moment. Zoe walked slowly to the bed, took his hand, the one without the four, and squeezed it gently. "Luca," she whispered, "it's me. I'm here." No response. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor. Zoe sat in the chair beside the bed, still holding his hand, and began to talk. "I'm sorry," she said through her tears. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I was a coward. I was so scared, Luca. Scared of losing you. Scared of the life you represented. But by running, I lost you anyway." She squeezed his hand tighter. "So I'm coming back. If you'll let me. If only, please wake up, please. I can't lose you. I can't live in a world without you in it." The hours passed. Zoe never left his side. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medication. The doctor came once, explaining that the bullet had damaged a lung, but they expected him to regain consciousness soon. Night fell, then dawn broke, and still Zoe sat, holding his hand. It was around 10 in the morning on the second day when she felt it. A slight movement, barely perceptible. His fingers tightened around her hand. Zoe's head snapped up. "Luca." His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Those dark eyes, those beautiful dark eyes, focused on her face. He tried to say something, but the tube stopped him. "No," Zoe said quickly. "Don't try to talk. You're in the hospital, you went through surgery, but you're going to be okay. Can you hear me? You're going to be okay." He squeezed her hand again, harder this time, and in his eyes she saw everything. Relief, love, the question. "Yes," she whispered, understanding. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, ever again." A tear rolled down his cheek, and Zoe leaned in and kissed his forehead, her own tears mixing with his. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much, and I don't care about the danger, I don't care about anything. Just you. Just us. His eyes closed, but this time not from weakness. This time with peace, because he finally felt whole. They were finally together. 3 months later, Zoe stood in front of the mirror in a small chapel, adjusting her simple white dress. Amanda stood behind her, fastening the tiny buttons on the back. Ready? Her friend asked. Zoe looked at her reflection, the ring on her finger, the same one Luca had given her months before, and the smile on her face. Genuine, happy. Yes, she said. I'm ready. This time, the ceremony was different, smaller, more intimate. Just the two of them, Amanda, and a few of Luca's close friends, the ones left over after most of his family had been arrested. Luca waited at the altar, handsome in a simple black suit, his arms still lightly bandaged, but the smile on his face brighter than ever. When Zoe reached him, he took her hands in his. The officiant smiled. I understand we're marrying these two again, for real this time. Zoe and Luca laughed. For real this time, Zoe confirmed. Then let's begin. But before the officiant could continue, Luca raised a hand. Excuse me, but may I say something first? The officiant nodded, smiling. Luca turned to Zoe, his eyes full of emotion. Zoe, he began, his voice low but steady. When I first met you, I thought it was an accident, a drunken Vegas wedding, a convenient arrangement. But it wasn't an accident. He took a breath. You were what I needed to see who I actually wanted to be. You gave me a reason to leave the darkness, a reason to become a better man. His thumb stroked her hand gently. I almost lost you. I almost lost everything, because of my own stupidity, because I tried to protect you instead of trusting you. But you gave me a second chance, and I swear to you, before God, before these people, that I will never keep secrets from you again. Never. Tears streamed down Zoe's cheeks, but she was smiling. Your turn, Luca said softly. Zoe took a deep breath. Luca, I ran. When things got hard, when I got scared, I ran. And it was the biggest mistake I've ever made. Her voice trembled, but she went on. Because life without you isn't life at all. I don't care if your past is complicated. I don't care if the future will be hard. All I care about is that we're together. Because you're my home, Luca. Not Las Vegas. Not Chicago. You. She squeezed his hand, her own eyes wet. The officiant cleared his throat, wiping away a tear of his own. Well, he said, I think you've already said your vows. He turned to Luca. Luca Antonio Russo, do you take Zoe as your wife, promising to love her, honor her, and be honest with her every day of your life? Yes, Luca said, his voice sure. 1,000 times yes. And you, Zoe Collins, do you take Luca as your husband, promising to love him, support him, and stand by him every day of your life? Zoe looked into Luca's dark eyes and saw her whole future in them. Hard, maybe, but beautiful. Yes, she whispered. Forever. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you, once again, husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. And he kissed her. This wasn't the rushed kiss from their first wedding. This wasn't the desperate kiss after the shooting. This was a kiss of promise, a kiss of beginning, a kiss that said, we're in this together, no matter what. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Russo, Luca whispered. For real this time. And forever. Forever, Zoe repeated. 10 years later, Zoe stood in the kitchen of her house in the suburbs of Las Vegas, more modest than the suite had been, but full of warmth, full of laughter, full of life. Through the window, she watched Luca in the backyard with their 2 kids. Marco, 8 years old, was trying to learn how to throw a football, while Alessandro, 6, ran in circles with a toy airplane, making engine noises. Luca caught Marco and lifted him into the air, both of them laughing. His tattoos still covered his arms, but new ones had joined them now, his children's birth dates written in careful script over his heart. He wasn't the Las Vegas man anymore. The criminal business was far behind him now. These days he ran a legitimate import business specializing in Italian food and wine. Life was quiet, ordinary, but it was still beautiful. Mom. Marco ran into the kitchen, cheeks flushed from running around outside. Dad said we can watch a movie tonight. Zoe smiled, crouching down to hug her oldest. Sure. And Dad remembers their school tomorrow. I remember. Luca's voice came from the doorway. He walked in carrying Alessandro on his shoulders. But I figured one late night wouldn't hurt. Zoe stood, crossing her arms with mock sternness. You spoil them. It's my job, he said, smiling mischievously. He set Alessandro down and walked over to his wife, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Besides, he murmured in her ear, I want them to have good memories of their childhood. Not like mine. Zoe turned in his arms, touching his face. They have them, and they will, because they have you. The real you. She kissed him softly, not caring that the kids made gagging noises in the background. That night, once the kids had finally fallen asleep after their movie marathon, Zoe and Luca sat on the porch under the stars. She held his hand, looking at the simple gold ring on his finger, the one from their real wedding. Any regrets? Luca asked quietly. Zoe thought about all of it. The drunken wedding, the fake marriage, the shootings and the fear, running away and coming back, almost losing him forever. Not a single one, she said finally, because all of it brought us here. She turned to look at him. To this house, to these kids, to us, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Luca pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. Neither would I, he whispered. And they sat there beneath the Las Vegas stars, holding each other, knowing their journey hadn't been easy, but that every step had been worth it, because sometimes the greatest loves begin with mistakes, and the most beautiful lives are born from second chances. Their story, from a drunken wedding to true love, was proof that sometimes fate knows better than we do. Sometimes a stranger becomes the person you know best in the world, and sometimes a fake ring becomes the truest thing you'll ever wear.